The council chamber was filled with noise. 47 different species sat in their seats, all talking at once. Some were shouting. Others were making the strange sounds that passed for speech in their languages. The air filtration systems worked hard to keep the atmosphere breathable for everyone. Commander Zalix stood at the center platform. His forearms were crossed over his chest. His scales had turned dark blue, which meant he was angry. He had been a soldier for 60 cycles, and he had never seen anything like this. "Silence," he said. His voice was not loud, but everyone stopped talking. They knew what he was about to say would not be good news. Zalix activated the holographic display. Images appeared in the air above them. Planets that were once green and full of life. Now they were gray and empty. Cities that had held billions of people. Now they were ruins. This was the Kellian system, Zalix said. Population, 4 billion. 3 days ago, the Vreka swarm arrived. Now there is nothing. No cities, no farms, no people. Just silence. A counselor from the Valorian species stood up. Her name was Thren, and she was old, even by Valorian standards. Her skin was pale, purple, and her large eyes were wet with tears. "How many systems have we lost?" she asked. 12, Zalix replied. "And the swarm is not slowing down. They move from world to world. They consume everything. Our ships cannot stop them. Our weapons barely slow them down." Another counselor spoke. He was from the Korthan Empire, the most powerful military force in the Union. His name was Vexor, and his voice was deep and rumbling. "Our fleets have engaged the swarm 6 times, Vexor said. "Each time, we lose more ships than we destroy. The swarm vessels regenerate. They adapt to our weapons. We hit them with plasma cannons, and they grow shields. We use missiles, and they develop point defense. It is as if they learn from every battle." The chamber filled with worried sounds. Some species made clicking noises. Others hummed low tones. Fear smelled different to every species. But right now, the chamber reeked of it. Zalix showed more images. These were of the Vreka creatures themselves. They were not machines, they were biological. Living ships made of flesh and bone. Ground troops that looked like nightmares. Claws that could cut through armor. Acid that melted metal. Bodies that could regrow limbs in minutes. "At our current rate of losses," Zalix continued, "the swarm will reach the core worlds in 6 months. Maybe less. We are evacuating the outer colonies now, but there is nowhere to run if the inner worlds fall." Counselor Thren stood again. She touched a control pad on her seat, and new information appeared on the main screen. It was a file marked with red symbols. Warning symbols. Warning. 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 "There may be one option," Thren said slowly. "But it is dangerous. Perhaps more dangerous than the swarm itself." The other counselors leaned forward. Thren had everyone's attention now. 30 cycles ago, our exploration fleet made contact with a new species, Thren explained. The planet was designated Earth, Sector 447. The initial contact team sent back one report, then recommended immediate quarantine. "Why?" Vexor asked. "Because Earth is a Class 1-2 death world," Thren said. "The highest danger rating we have ever recorded. The gravity is extreme. The weather patterns are violent. The native predators are aggressive. The diseases are deadly. Even the atmosphere is borderline toxic to most of us. By every measure, that planet should be uninhabitable." "But someone lives there?" another counselor asked. "Humans," Thren said. "They evolved on that nightmare world. They are the apex predators." The contact team was terrified of them, not because the humans were hostile, but because of what they were capable of. The team recommended, "We leave them alone and never go back." Zalix studied the file. He saw images of humans. They looked weak compared to many species. 2 arms, 2 legs, no natural armor, No claws, no venom. But there was something in their eyes that made him uncomfortable. What makes them so dangerous? He asked. Thren displayed more information. Biological scans, cultural reports, military assessments. Everything about them is designed for survival in the harshest conditions, Thren explained. Their bones can withstand incredible force. Their blood clots rapidly to prevent death from injuries. They can survive for days without water and weeks without food. They can adapt to almost any environment. Hot deserts, frozen wastelands, high mountains where the air is thin, deep oceans. They live everywhere on their planet. That still does not explain why we quarantined them, Vexer said. Their psychology, Thren answered. Humans are pack hunters. They form bonds with their groups that override their survival instincts. They will die to protect their pack. They also have something we have never seen in any other species. They refuse to give up. Ever. When faced with impossible odds, they do not surrender. They fight harder. The chamber was silent now. Every counselor was reading the reports on their personal screens. The contact team observed human history. Thren continued. These beings have been fighting since they learned to walk. They fight nature. They fight each other. They fight everything. They have survived ice ages, plagues, asteroids, and volcanic eruptions that would have ended most civilizations. And each time, they come back stronger. Counselor Vexer made a sound like grinding stones. It was how his species expressed doubt. They sound primitive, he said. What good would primitive warriors do against the swarm? Their technology is crude, Thren admitted. But it works. They use kinetic weapons, explosives, chemical agents, things we abandoned thousands of cycles ago because they were too brutal. But humans never stopped improving them. Zalix closed his eyes. He was a soldier. He understood what Thren was suggesting. Sometimes, you needed monsters to fight monsters. You want to ask these Deathworlders for help, he said. I see no other choice, Thren replied. Our elegant weapons and tactics are failing. Perhaps we need something brutal. Something the swarm has never encountered. The vote took 3 hours. It was not unanimous. Many counselors argued against it. They said humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent. But in the end, fear of the swarm was greater than fear of the unknown. The council agreed to send a message to Earth. They would ask for help from the species they had abandoned and quarantined. They would ask the Deathworlders to save them. A young officer named Vess was chosen to deliver the message. She was from the Quelon species. Known for their scientific minds and diplomatic skills, she accepted the mission with quiet determination, even though she knew she might be flying towards something more dangerous than the swarm itself. As her ship prepared to leave the central nexus, Lieutenant Vess felt her stomach turn as her ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. She had made this journey many times before to different systems, but this time felt different. This time, she was visiting the Forbidden World. Her sensors immediately started screaming warnings at her. The system was full of activity. Satellites, defense platforms, ships moving in patrol patterns. For a species that had been quarantined and left alone for 30 cycles, the humans had been very busy. This is Lieutenant Vess of the Galactic Union, she broadcast on all frequencies. I come in peace with an urgent message for the people of Earth. The response was fast. Too fast. Within seconds, 6 human ships appeared on her sensors. They had been hiding somehow, using stealth technology that should not have been possible for their level of development. Unknown vessel. This is Captain Jake Morrison, of the Earth Defense Fleet. A voice came through her communication system. You are in restricted space. State your purpose. Vess was surprised by how calm the human sounded. No anger. No fear. Just professional and direct. She had expected something more primitive. Captain Morrison, I apologize for entering your space without permission, Vess replied. But the Galactic Union faces an emergency. We need help. May I approach your planet to deliver this message properly? There was a pause. Vess knew her message was being transmitted to Earth, probably to whoever was in charge down there. She studied her sensors while she waited. The human ships were interesting. They used fusion drives, which was old technology by Union standards, but they moved with precision. They worked together like a school of fish, each one knowing exactly where the others were. You can approach Earth, Captain Morrison finally replied, but you will have an escort. Do not deviate from the flight path we are sending you. Do not scan our facilities. Do not launch any probes. If you do any of these things, we will consider it a hostile act. Understood, Vess said. She received the flight path and followed it exactly. The 6 human ships surrounded her vessel, keeping a respectful distance but making it clear they were ready for trouble. As they flew toward the blue and green planet, Vess could not help but stare. Earth was beautiful. Oceans covered most of the surface. White clouds swirled in patterns. She could see green continents and brown deserts. It looked peaceful, but her sensors told a different story. The gravity was immense. The weather systems were chaotic. The tectonic plates were constantly shifting. This planet was alive in a way that most worlds were not. It was active, dynamic, dangerous. Your world is beautiful, Vess said to Captain Morrison. Thank you, Morrison replied. We like it. It is home. They brought her to a space station, orbiting the planet. It was not as advanced as Union stations, but it was functional and surprisingly large. Humans in uniforms watched her through viewports as her ship was guided to a docking bay. When Vess stepped off her ship, she immediately felt the difference. The artificial gravity on the station was set to Earth normal. It was crushing. She had to activate her support harness just to stand upright. She saw human crew members walking around easily, not struggling at all. This was normal for them. Captain Morrison met her at the airlock. He was tall by human standards, with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything. He wore a blue uniform with patches and symbols she did not recognize. Welcome to Gateway Station, Morrison said. Your message is being reviewed by our government right now. They will want to speak with you directly. Of course, Vess replied, trying not to show how much the gravity was affecting her. How long will that take? They are ready now, Morrison said. Follow me. Vess was surprised again. She had expected days of bureaucracy. Instead, within hours of arriving, she was being taken to speak with Earth's leaders. These humans moved fast. The conference room had a large screen. On it appeared several humans sitting around a table. Morrison told her their names and positions. President Lisa Garrett, General Ben Hayes, Admiral Kate Sullivan, others whose titles she did not fully understand. President Garrett spoke first. She was a woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but there was steel in her voice. Lieutenant Vess, we have reviewed the information you transmitted, Garrett said. The situation with this Vreka swarm is worse than we imagined. Millions of lives lost. Entire worlds consumed. We are sorry for your losses. Thank you, Madam President, Vess replied. The Union is desperate. That is why we have come to you despite the quarantine. We need help. We need warriors. We need hope. General Hayes leaned forward. He was an older man, with scars on his face and hands that suggested he had seen combat. Let me be direct, Hayes said. Why should we help? Your Union quarantined us. You left us alone in the dark for 30 years. You decided we were too dangerous, too violent, too primitive. Now you want our help. Why should we care what happens to you? The question was harsh but fair. Vess had expected it. She had prepared for it. You are right to be angry, Vess said. The Union made a decision based on fear. We saw what your people were capable of, and it frightened us. But that decision was wrong. It was cowardly. And now we are paying for it. She touched her data pad. and new images appeared on the screen. Images of Vreka attacks, cities burning, civilians running, children crying for parents who would never answer. But this is not about politics or past mistakes, Vess continued. This is about survival. Not just for the Union, but for every living being in this part of the galaxy. If the swarm is not stopped, they will keep spreading. Eventually, they will reach Earth. Maybe not this year or next year, but they will come. They consume everything in their path. The room was quiet as the human leaders watched the footage. Vess saw their expressions change. She saw anger, sadness, determination. Admiral Sullivan spoke next. She was younger than the others, with red hair tied back and sharp green eyes. "What kind of force would you need from us?" Sullivan asked. "How many ships? How many troops?" "Any help would be valuable," Vess said carefully. "We understand your fleet is small and your resources are limited." "That is not what I asked," Sullivan said firmly. "If we do this, we do it right. So tell me what you actually need, not what you think we can provide." Vess was impressed by the Admiral's directness. She pulled up tactical assessments. "Realistically, we need at least 10 capital ships and several thousand ground troops," Vess said. "The swarm fights both in space and on planetary surfaces. We need forces that can operate in hostile environments. Forces that can adapt quickly. Forces that do not break when the situation becomes desperate." General Hayes and Admiral Sullivan exchanged looks. Then Hayes smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for a fight. "We can do that," Hayes said. President Garrett held up her hand. "Before we commit, I need to address something. Lieutenant Vess, you said the Union feared us because of our capacity for violence. You were right to fear that. Humans are very good at violence. We have spent our entire history perfecting it. But we are also capable of compassion, of sacrifice, of standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves." Garrett stood up, and even through the screen, Vess could feel the weight of her presence. "I am authorizing the deployment of the 1st Expeditionary Fleet," Garrett said. 10 warships, 3,000 colonial marines. They will be ready to depart in 24 hours. Admiral Sullivan will command the fleet. General Hayes will coordinate ground operations. Vess felt her legs go weak. 24 hours? That was impossible. It took weeks to prepare a fleet for deployment. "Madam President," Vess said carefully, "did you say 24 hours?" "I did," Garrett replied. "Is that a problem?" "No, no problem," Vess said, though she was certain she had misheard. "I just expected it would take longer to prepare. Lieutenant, we have been preparing for war since the day you left us alone," Garrett said. "We built these ships. We trained these troops. We developed our tactics. We have been ready. We were just waiting for a reason to show the galaxy what we could do." Captain Morrison escorted Vess back to her ship. She was still trying to process what had just happened. Earth had agreed to help. More than that, they were sending a significant force, and they would be ready in one day. "Your people move very fast," Vess said to Morrison. "We learned that life is short and time is precious," Morrison replied. "When something needs to be done, we do not wait, we act." As Vess prepared to depart, she watched through her viewport as human ships began to gather. They came from different orbital positions, from the dark side of the moon, from stations she had not even detected. Within hours, 10 large warships had assembled. She read their names painted on their hulls: Defiance, Indomitable, Warhound, Sentinel. Names that spoke of strength and determination. The planet Therix Prime had once been beautiful. Green forests, blue oceans, cities that glowed at night like jewels. 3 billion people called it home. Now, it was dying. Commander Zalek stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the battle unfold below. The Union defense fleet was losing. Again, the Vreka swarm had arrived 2 days ago, and the defenders had been retreating ever since. "Sir, we have lost another cruiser," his tactical officer reported. "The swarm's bioacid is burning through our shields faster than we can regenerate them." Zalix watched as another Union ship exploded in a ball of fire. That was 12 ships lost in this battle alone, and the swarm just kept coming. Their living vessels moved through space like sharks through water. Graceful. Deadly. Unstoppable. "Pull back to defensive position 3, Zalix ordered. "Focus fire on the smaller swarm ships. Maybe we can slow them down." But he knew it would not be enough. Nothing had been enough. On the planet below, the swarm's ground forces were overrunning the last defensive positions. Evacuation ships were trying to get civilians off-world, but there was not enough time. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission," the communication officer said. "It is from the human fleet." Zalix felt a small spark of hope. The humans had arrived 3 hours ago and had been observing the battle from a distance. He had sent them tactical data, but they had not responded until now. "Put them through," Zalix said. The screen showed a human woman in a dark blue uniform. Her hair was red and pulled back tight. Her eyes were green and sharp like a blade. This was Admiral Kate Sullivan, commander of the human fleet. "Commander Zalix, this is Admiral Sullivan," she said. Her voice was calm, like she was discussing the weather instead of a desperate battle. "We have analyzed the situation. We are ready to engage." "Admiral, I appreciate your help," Zalix replied. "But I must warn you. The swarm is unlike anything you have faced. Their ships regenerate damage. Their weapons adapt to our defenses. We have lost 12 ships already." "Noted," Sullivan said. "We are moving in now. I recommend you pull your fleet back to a safe distance. Things are about to get messy." Before Zalix could respond, the human ships moved. They did not move like Union vessels, with careful formations and elegant maneuvers. They moved like predators. Fast. Direct. Aggressive. Fast. The lead ship, Defiance, accelerated straight toward the heart of the swarm formation. The other 9 human ships followed in a tight group. Zalix watched in horror as they flew directly into the densest concentration of swarm vessels. "What are they doing?" his tactical officer shouted. "That is suicide." The swarm reacted immediately. Hundreds of bioweapons fired at the human ships. Acid projectiles. Living missiles. Energy weapons that had melted through Union armor, like butter. The human ships flew right through it all. Zalix expected to see the human vessels destroyed. Instead, he saw something that made no sense. The human ships were taking hits. Direct hits. But they were not stopping. The acid splashed against their armor and ran off. The living missiles exploded against their hulls and did minimal damage. "How?" Zalix whispered. "Their armor is different," his science officer reported, studying the scans frantically. "It is thick. Incredibly thick. Layers of different materials. The acid cannot burn through fast enough. The impacts are being absorbed by internal structures." The human ships reached firing range. What happened next would be talked about in every Union military academy for generations. The Defiance opened fire with its main weapons. Not energy beams. Not plasma cannons. Solid metal projectiles moving at incredible speeds. The kinetic rounds hit a swarm bioship and went straight through it. The organic vessel shuddered and began to break apart. The other human ships opened fire. Hundreds of rounds per second. The swarm vessels tried to regenerate, but they could not keep up. The metal projectiles were shredding their biological structures faster than they could heal. "Impossible," Zalix said. "We tried kinetic weapons centuries ago. They were ineffective." "Well, not at those velocities," his science officer said. "The humans are accelerating their projectiles to a fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy is enormous. The swarm's regeneration cannot handle it. Unquote. The 7, one swarm ship tried to board the human cruiser Warhound. The organic vessel latched onto the hull and began cutting through. Zalix saw the breach form. He expected to see swarm organisms pour inside. Instead, the human ship deliberately opened more hatches. Swarm creatures rushed in, ready to tear the crew apart. Then, Zalix saw something on his sensors that made his blood run cold. The internal atmosphere in that section of the Warhound was at Earth normal. High pressure, high oxygen, crushing gravity. The swarm organisms were adapted to vacuum and low pressure. When they entered the human ship, they were crushed. They turned their own environment into a weapon, Zalix said in awe. Admiral Sullivan's voice came over the communication channel again. She was not even breathing hard. Commander Zalix, we are breaking their orbital formation. You should move your ships to cover the evacuation transports. We will handle the swarm. Understood, Zalix replied. He gave the orders, and his fleet repositioned. For the first time in weeks, Union ships were moving forward, instead of retreating. On the surface of Therix Prime, the situation was even more desperate. The swarm's ground forces were everywhere. Millions of creatures with claws and teeth and acid. The Union troops had been pushed back to the last evacuation zone. Colonel Dan Wright stood in the landing bay of the troop transport overhead, watching his Marines prepare. 3,000 soldiers in powered armor, each one carrying weapons that the Union troops below had never seen. Listen up, Wright said over the command channel. The situation down there is bad. The Union forces are about to be overrun. We are going in hard and fast. Our job is to secure the evacuation zone and hold it until every civilian is off that rock. Questions. Rapid. End quote. Iwoodmeaded said, Sir, the Union troops are saying the swarm creatures regenerate from injuries, one Marine said. How do we deal with that? Thuv. We shoot them more, Wright replied. A lot more. If they grow back, we keep shooting until they stop growing back. The human body has limits. So do theirs. The drop pods launched. No shields. No fancy anti-gravity. Just heat-resistant armor and retro rockets. The pods fell through the atmosphere like meteors, burning bright as they descended. Sergeant Amy Clark felt her stomach drop as her pod hit the atmosphere. The temperature inside rose despite the cooling systems. The whole pod shook like it was going to break apart. This was her fourth combat drop, and it never got easier. The pod hit the ground hard. The retro rockets fired at the last second, slowing them just enough to survive the impact. The doors blew open, and Clark and her squad rushed out. The scene was chaos. Union soldiers were firing desperately at waves of swarm creatures. The aliens were losing ground with every second. Some Union troops were already running toward the evacuation ships. Form defensive perimeter, Clark ordered. Her squad moved into position with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this. Hostile environment. Overwhelming odds. Desperate defenders. The swarm creatures saw the new arrivals and charged. They were fast. They were vicious. They expected the same plasma weapons the Union used. Clark opened fire with her rifle. Not plasma. Not energy. Good old-fashioned bullets. Lots of them. The metal rounds tore through the swarm creatures, like paper. One creature tried to regenerate its damaged limbs. Clark fired again, and again, until the creature stopped moving permanently. Grenades out! Someone shouted. Fragmentation grenades landed among the swarm forces. The explosions sent metal fragments in all directions. The swarm had no defense against thousands of tiny pieces of shrapnel moving at supersonic speeds. A swarm creature got close enough to attack a Marine directly. Its claws scraped against the powered armor and left scratches, but did not penetrate. The Marine grabbed the creature and threw it into a group of its companions. Then he fired a burst that cut them all down. Lieutenant Chris Palmer led his squad to reinforce a weak point in the line. The Union troops there looked exhausted and terrified. They had been fighting for hours with no rest. "We got this," Palmer told them. "Fall back to the secondary line. Get some rest. We will hold here." The Union soldiers did not argue. They had seen what the humans could do. They retreated gratefully. The swarm launched another attack. Hundreds of creatures rushing forward in a coordinated assault. Palmer's squad opened fire. When the creatures got too close, the Marines fixed bayonets to their rifles. When the bayonets broke, they switched to combat knives. When those were lost, they used their armored fists. One Marine ran out of ammunition entirely. Without hesitation, he pulled out a small device and ignited it. Flames shot out. The swarm creatures screamed as they burned. They had never encountered fire as a weapon before. Their biology had no adaptation for it. The battle lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of continuous fighting. The Marines did not retreat. They did not ask for relief. They held the line while every single civilian was loaded onto evacuation ships. By the time the last transport lifted off, the evacuation zone was surrounded by dead swarm creatures, thousands of them. The ground was covered in their bodies, and standing in the middle of it all were 3,000 colonial Marines, still ready to fight. Commander Zalix brought his flagship into low orbit and looked at the tactical display. The swarm's orbital forces were retreating. On the ground, the swarm was pulling back to regroup. For the first time since the war began, the Union had won a complete victory. "Casualties?" he asked quietly. 17 human soldiers wounded, his tactical officer reported. 0 killed. Zalix looked at the numbers again. 17 wounded. Against an enemy that had killed thousands of Union troops in every previous engagement. Against an enemy that had destroyed dozens of Union ships. He opened a communication channel to Admiral Sullivan. "Admiral, your people saved 3 billion lives today," Zalix said. "I do not have words sufficient to thank you." News of the victory at Therix Prime spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed messages could travel. Every Union world heard the story. The humans had done what the entire Union military could not do. They had stopped the swarm. Within days, the communication channels were flooded with requests. Dozens of worlds under swarm attack begged for human assistance. The Union Council met in emergency session. President Lisa Garrett appeared on screens across Union space. Her message was clear and direct. "Earth stands with the Galactic Union," she said. "We are deploying additional fleets. The 2nd and 3rd Expeditionary Forces are now active. No world that asks for help will be ignored." True to her word, more human ships arrived. They came from Earth's orbital shipyards, from hidden bases in the asteroid belt, from construction facilities on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. The Union had assumed Earth had a dozen ships at most. They had dozens of squadrons. The ships had names that reflected human history and values. Names like Indomitable, Relentless, Victory, Justice, Freedom, Courage. Each name was a promise, a statement. These ships were built for war, and they would not stop until the war was won. Captain Mike Torres commanded the cruiser Vanguard. His ship was assigned to defend Kellyan Station, a massive trading hub that supported 4 different star systems. The swarm had already destroyed half the station. The Union defenders were exhausted and running low on ammunition. Torres studied the tactical display. The swarm had deployed something new, a massive bio-construct the size of a small moon. It was covered in weapons and armor that regenerated faster than it could be damaged. Union ships had been firing at it for 6 hours with no effect. "Captain, the station is requesting immediate assistance," his communication officer reported. "They are evacuating non-essential personnel, but there are still 2 million people on board." Torres watched as another Union ship fired full power at the bio-construct. The shots hit, caused damage, and then the creature healed itself in seconds. The Union ship had to retreat before it ran out of power. "How do you kill something that will not die?" his tactical officer muttered. Torres smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had just figured out the answer to a problem. "You do not kill it," Torres said. "You give it something it cannot heal from. Helm. Full speed ahead. Direct course to that bioconstruct." The bridge went quiet. Everyone understood what the captain was ordering. A ramming attack. The oldest naval tactic in human history, now applied to space combat. "Sir, we will not survive the impact," the tactical officer said carefully. "The armor will hold," Torres replied with confidence. "Our bow is reinforced to push through asteroid fields. That thing is biological. We are metal and composite. Physics is on our side." The Vanguard accelerated. The bioconstruct saw the approaching human ship and fired every weapon it had. Energy beams. Bioacid. Living missiles. Everything hit the Vanguard's forward shields and armor. The ship shuddered. Alarms blared. But it kept coming. Torres held onto his chair as the ship picked up speed. The fusion drives were at maximum power. The hull was screaming from the stress. Crew members secured themselves as the impact approached. The Vanguard hit the bioconstruct at full speed. The reinforced bow punched through the organic armor like a spear through flesh. The ship buried itself deep into the creature's body, ripping through vital organs and support structures. The bioconstruct tried to regenerate. But there was a human warship, lodged in its core, and that ship was still firing all weapons. Missiles launched from internal bays directly into the creature's internal organs. Cannons fired point-blank into critical systems. The bioconstruct shuddered and began to break apart. Pieces of it drifted away into space. After 10 minutes, it was nothing but debris. The Vanguard backed out of the wreckage. The bow was damaged, but intact. Torres's gamble had worked. The ship had survived, and the threat was eliminated. "All stations report damage," Torres ordered. "And someone send a message to the station. Tell them the threat is neutralized." On the industrial world of Forge 9, the situation was different but equally desperate. The swarm controlled most of the planet. Union civilians were trapped in underground bunkers, surrounded by enemy forces. Major Nicole Barnes led a special operations team deep into swarm territory. 12 soldiers. One mission. Rescue 5,000 civilians and get them to the evacuation point. The environment was hostile even by human standards. The air was full of toxic gases from the planet's factories. The gravity was heavy. The temperature was extreme. The Union had evacuated most of their forces because it was too dangerous. The Marines moved through the ruins of a manufacturing complex. Their armor protected them from the environment, but they still had to be careful. One wrong step could send them falling through weakened floors into acid pools below. "Contact ahead," Corporal Tyler Jensen whispered over the radio. 20 swarm creatures. Infantry class. Barnes studied the tactical display in her helmet. The swarm soldiers were between her team and the bunker entrance. They would have to go through them. "Suppressors on," Barnes ordered. "We go quiet. We get to those civilians before the swarm knows we are here." The Marines attached suppressors to their weapons. The devices did not make the guns silent, but they reduced the noise significantly. In the chaos of the industrial complex, it might be enough. They moved like ghosts through the ruins. When they encountered swarm patrols, they eliminated them quickly and quietly. Suppressed gunfire, combat knives, precise strikes that killed before the enemy could alert others. They reached the bunker entrance after 2 hours of careful movement. Barnes used her armor's communication system to contact the civilians inside. "This is Major Barnes of the Earth Colonial Marines," she transmitted. "We are here to get you out. Open the door." There was a long pause. Then a scared voice replied, "How do we know you are real? How do we know this is not a swarm trick? Because if we were the swarm, we would be breaking down your door right now, instead of asking nicely," Barnes replied. "You have 5,000 people in there. We have a way out, but we need to move fast. So, Open the door. The massive blast door slowly opened. Inside were Union civilians of a dozen different species. Men, women, children, all looking exhausted and terrified. They had been hiding for days with limited food and water. Everyone form up, Barnes ordered. We are moving in groups of 500. My team will lead. Stay quiet. Stay close. If something happens, drop to the ground and let us handle it. The evacuation began. 5,000 civilians moving through hostile territory. It should have been impossible. But the Marines made it work. They moved the groups one at a time. They cleared paths. They eliminated swarm patrols before the civilians even knew they were there. 8 hours into the evacuation, things went wrong. A swarm patrol spotted the last group of civilians. Alarms echoed through the complex. Within minutes, hundreds of swarm creatures were converging on their position. Everyone to the bunker, Barnes ordered. Now. 12 soldiers against hundreds of enemies. The Marines took up defensive positions at a choke point where the swarm could only attack from one direction. Barnes checked her ammunition. She had enough for maybe 10 minutes of sustained fire. After that, things would get interesting. The swarm attacked in waves. The Marines fired with controlled precision. Every shot was aimed. Every bullet found a target. But there were too many enemies. For every swarm creature they killed, 2 more appeared. Running low on ammo, Jensen reported. Same here, another Marine added. Barnes made a decision. Fix bayonets. If they want this bunker, they are going to have to take it from us. The Marines attached bayonets to their rifles. Long blades designed for close combat. When the next wave of swarm creatures reached their position, the Marines met them with steel. Corporal Jensen fought with a fury that surprised even himself. His rifle became an extension of his body. Shooting. Stabbing. Using the weapon, like a spear. When his rifle finally broke, he drew his combat knife and kept fighting. Another Marine ran completely out of ammunition. Without hesitation, he started using his entrenching tool. A small shovel designed for digging defensive positions. The sharp edge cut through swarm creatures with brutal efficiency. The battle lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of continuous combat. The Marines took turns falling back to reload or catch their breath, but they never abandoned the position. When Union reinforcements finally arrived, they found the entrance to the bunker surrounded by dead swarm creatures. In the middle of it all stood 12 colonial Marines, covered in blood and exhausted but still ready to fight. The 5,000 civilians were evacuated safely. Every single one survived because 12 humans refused to give up. Lieutenant Vess was no longer just a courier. She had been assigned as the official liaison between Earth and the Union military. She traveled with the human fleets, observing their tactics and reporting back to the Council. She sat in her quarters on the Central Nexus, writing her latest report. But this time, she included more than just tactical data. She included her observations about humans themselves. The humans are unlike any species in the Union, she wrote. They approach warfare as both an art and a science. They study their enemies. They adapt faster than any species I have encountered. They find weaknesses and exploit them without mercy. But what makes them truly dangerous is their psychology. Humans form bonds with each other that override their survival instincts. They will sacrifice themselves for their companions without hesitation. This is not training. This is something fundamental to who they are. They also possess something I have never seen before. They refuse to accept defeat. When faced with impossible odds, they do not surrender. They fight harder. When told something cannot be done, they find a way to do it anyway. The Union was right to be concerned about humans. But we were concerned for the wrong reasons. We feared they would be aggressive toward us. We never considered they might be aggressive on our behalf. Vess paused and looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were fighting. Human soldiers were dying to protect Union civilians. The Deathworlders had answered the call, and they were changing everything. On the central nexus, Counselor Thren addressed the council. She displayed footage from 4 months had passed since the humans joined the war. 4 months of continuous fighting. The Vreka swarm had been pushed back system by system. Worlds that had been lost were now being reclaimed. The tide had turned, but the cost had been high. Thousands of Union soldiers were dead, hundreds of ships destroyed, and nearly 2,000 human casualties. The war was being won, but everyone was tired. General Ben Hayes stood in the command center on Earth, looking at the strategic map. The swarm had retreated to their core territory in what the Union called the Dark Sector. 3 hive worlds, the source of everything. If those worlds fell, the swarm would be finished. President Garrett entered the room. She looked older than she had 4 months ago. The weight of command was visible in her eyes. The council wants to establish a quarantine around the Dark Sector, Garrett said. They want to contain the swarm instead of destroying them. Hayes turned to face her. That is a mistake. We have studied the swarm. They are like a virus. If you leave even a small part alive, they will eventually grow back. Maybe not this year or next year, but eventually. I know, Garrett replied. That is what I told them. But they are afraid of what comes next. They are afraid of the cost of a final assault. What did you tell them? Hayes asked. I told them that half measures are what got them into this situation in the first place, Garrett said. The Union has spent centuries avoiding difficult decisions. Now, they have to make one. Either we finish this, or we accept that the swarm will always be a threat. Hayes pulled up a detailed tactical plan. 3 primary targets, 3 simultaneous assaults. It would require everything the combined fleet could muster. This is going to be the biggest military operation in galactic history, Hayes said. 100 Union warships, 30 of our ships, 50,000 Union troops, 10,000 colonial marines. We hit all 3 hive worlds at the same time. We do not stop until every swarm organism is dead. Garrett studied the plan carefully. The projected casualties were staggering. Even with the best tactics and the best troops, thousands would die. Can we win? She asked quietly. Yes, Hayes replied without hesitation. But it will not be pretty. The swarm is going to throw everything they have at us. They will be desperate. They will be fighting for survival. It will be the hardest battle of this war. Garrett made her decision. Present this plan to the council. Tell them Earth is committed. We are not asking for permission. We are telling them what needs to be done. They can either join us or stand aside. The council meeting was tense. Many counselors argued against the plan. They said it was too aggressive, too risky, too brutal. Admiral Kate Sullivan attended the meeting via hologram. She listened to the arguments for an hour before she had enough. With all due respect, Sullivan interrupted, you are debating the wrong question. The question is not whether we should attack. The question is whether you want to win this war or just survive it. Explain. Counselor, Thren said, survival means building walls and hoping the enemy never breaks through, Sullivan said. Victory means making sure the enemy cannot threaten anyone ever again. You have spent 4 months surviving. Earth came here to help you win. But the cost, another counselor protested, will be less than the cost of fighting this war for another 10 years, Sullivan replied. Or 20 years. Or however long it takes before the swarm finds a way past your walls. You are afraid of the assault. I understand that. But you should be more afraid of what happens if we do nothing. Commander Zalix spoke up. He had been fighting the swarm longer than anyone. Admiral Sullivan is correct, he said. I have been a soldier for 60 cycles. I know when an enemy can be negotiated with. The swarm cannot. They exist only to consume. If we do not destroy them completely, They will destroy us eventually. The vote was close. But eventually, the council agreed. The assault would proceed. Every available ship would participate. Every able soldier would be deployed. The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history gathered at the edge of the dark sector. 130 warships, 60,000 troops, support vessels, medical ships, supply transports. Everyone who could fight was there. Admiral Sullivan addressed the entire fleet on an open channel. To all ships, this is Admiral Sullivan, she said. Today we end this war. Today we show the swarm what happens when they threaten peaceful civilizations. Today we show the galaxy what humans and our Union allies can accomplish when we fight together. Remember what we are fighting for. Remember the worlds that were lost. Remember the civilians we saved. And remember that we are not just fighting for survival. We are fighting for every future generation that will never know the terror of the swarm. The fleet jumped into the dark sector. 3 groups, 3 targets. The battle began immediately. At the hive world designated Vreka Prime, the swarm's defense was overwhelming. Bioships, the size of small moons, emerged from the planet. Orbital defense organisms that could swallow frigates whole. Energy weapons that could burn through shields in seconds. The Union fleet took heavy losses in the first hour. Ships exploded. Others retreated with critical damage. But the human ships pushed forward. They absorbed damage that would have destroyed any other vessel and kept fighting. Commander Alex Wright commanded the battleship Titan. His ship was hit by a bioplasma lance that melted through 3 decks. Fire broke out in the lower sections. Hundreds of crew members were trapped. Seal those decks, Wright ordered. Vent them to space. We cannot stop to fight the fires. It was a brutal order. Everyone in those decks would die. But if the fire spread, the whole ship would be lost. The crew members, trapped below, understood. They sent final messages to their families and faced their deaths with dignity. The Titan kept fighting. With 3 decks gone and a quarter of the crew dead, it continued to fire on swarm targets. This was what humans did. They accepted losses and continued the mission. On the surface of Vreka Prime, the assault became a nightmare. The entire planet was a biological fortress. The ground itself was made of living tissue. The atmosphere was toxic, even to swarm creatures. Trenches healed themselves. Bunkers grew new weapons. Sergeant Hannah Price led her platoon toward the primary spawning complex. Intelligence said this was where the swarm created new warriors. Destroy it. And you crippled their ability to produce troops. The platoon carried tactical nuclear weapons. Small yield. Designed for precision strikes. But the mission was still dangerous. They had to get close enough to plant the weapons. Then they had to activate them. The radiation in the area made remote detonation impossible. Everyone knows what this means, Price said to her squad. This is a one-way mission. We plant these weapons, we activate them, and we make sure they go off. That is it. No evac. No rescue. Just the mission. Private Kevin Barnes spoke up. He was young, only 19 years old. Sergeant, I just want to say it has been an honor serving with you all. Save it for when we are done, Price replied. But she smiled. These were good soldiers, good people. They deserved better than to die on this horrible world. But sometimes that was what duty required. The platoon fought through 2 kilometers of hostile territory. They lost soldiers at every step. Swarm creatures ambushed them from tunnels. Organic turrets fired from hidden positions. The ground itself tried to trap them with sticky secretions. When they reached the spawning complex, only 4 soldiers remained. Price, Barnes, Corporal Meg Foster, and Private Sam Chen. 4 soldiers standing in front of a massive biological structure that was producing thousands of swarm warriors every hour. Plant the charges, Price ordered. They worked quickly. The nuclear devices were set at key structural points. The timers were set for 5 minutes. Just enough time to make sure everything was ready. Swarm creatures poured out of the complex, realizing what was happening. The 4 Marines formed a defensive circle and opened fire. They knew they would not survive. They just needed to hold long enough for the weapons to detonate. Barnes took a hit to his leg. He fell but kept firing from the ground. Foster was struck by acid, and her armor began to melt. She dropped her rifle and pulled out her pistol, continuing to fight with one hand while trying to seal her suit with the other. Chen ran out of ammunition. He drew his combat knife and charged the nearest swarm creature. He killed it, and 2 more before they overwhelmed him. Price was alone now. Surrounded by enemies. Her weapon was empty. Her armor was damaged. But the timer showed 30 seconds remaining. She pulled out her last grenade. Not fragmentation. Thermite. A weapon that burned hot enough to melt metal. She activated it and held it close. "For Earth," she said quietly. The nuclear weapons detonated. The explosion was visible from orbit. The entire spawning complex collapsed. Millions of swarm organisms died instantly. The shockwave spread across the planet's surface. Similar sacrifices occurred on all 3 hive worlds. Soldiers who knew they would not come home. Pilots who flew their damaged ships into critical targets. Crews who stayed at their posts until the end. After 16 hours of continuous combat, the assault succeeded. The hive minds died. Without central coordination, the swarm forces fell into chaos. Individual creatures fought on, but they were just animals now. Dangerous, but not organized. The combined fleet moved through the dark sector, eliminating every remaining swarm vessel. It took another week of cleanup operations, but eventually, it was done. The Vreka swarm was extinct. The victory celebration on the central nexus was emotional. The Union had been at war for almost a year. They had lost millions of people. Now, it was over. But the celebration was also sad. Lists of casualties scrolled across screens. Union names. Human names. So many names. President Garrett gave a speech to the assembled council. Her voice was heavy with emotion. "We came to help because it was the right thing to do," Garrett said. "Not for territory. Not for resources. Not for recognition. We came because people needed help, and we could provide it." 6 months had passed since the end of the war. The galaxy was healing. Worlds that had been evacuated were being resettled. Cities were being rebuilt. Life was slowly returning to normal, but nothing was truly the same. The war had changed everything. Lieutenant Vess stood on an observation deck of the central nexus, watching ships come and go. Earth vessels were now a common sight. They no longer traveled alone or stayed at the edges of Union space. They were integrated into the fleet. Trusted, respected, Captain Jake Morrison joined her at the window. He was visiting the station as part of a cultural exchange program. Earth was sending diplomats and scientists to Union worlds, and Union civilians were being allowed to visit Earth for the first time. "Strange, is it not?" Vess said. "6 months ago, your people were quarantined. Now you are everywhere. Change happens fast sometimes," Morrison replied. "Especially when you prove yourself in fire." Vess thought about that. The humans had proven themselves. Over and over. In every battle. In every desperate situation. They had shown the galaxy what they were capable of. "I have been writing reports about your people for months now," Vess said. "The Council wants to understand humans better. They want to know what makes you different." "And what have you concluded?" Morrison asked. "That you are terrifying," Vess said honestly. "Not because you are violent, but because you refuse to accept limits. When we say something is impossible, you find a way to do it. When we say the odds are too great, you charge forward anyway." Morrison smiled. "Our planet taught us that limits are just challenges waiting to be overcome. Earth tried to kill us for millions of years. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, diseases, disasters. And we survived all of it. Not by accepting our fate, but by refusing to give up. A Union transport ship docked nearby. Vess watched as Union civilians stepped off. They were heading to Earth. Tourist groups, students, scientists, people who wanted to see the death world for themselves. The Union had been afraid of Earth. Now they were fascinated by it. Human culture was spreading across the galaxy. Human music, human art, human stories. Species that had never known war were reading human military history with awe and horror. On Earth, similar changes were happening. Lisa Garrett was no longer just the president of Earth. She was a recognized leader in the Galactic Union. Her opinions carried weight in council debates. But Garrett had not forgotten the cost. She visited the memorial that had been built in Geneva. A massive wall covered in names. Every human who had died in the war. Nearly 2,000 names. General Ben Hayes joined her at the memorial. He had aged visibly during the war. The weight of command had left its mark. "They are calling us heroes," Garrett said quietly. "The Union thinks we saved them." "We did save them," Hayes replied. "Without Earth's intervention, the swarm would have consumed half the galaxy. But at what price?" Garrett gestured to the wall of names. 2,000 lives. 2,000 families who lost someone. I sent them to fight. I gave the orders that got them killed. Hayes put a hand on her shoulder. You gave them the opportunity to make a difference. Every one of them volunteered. Every one knew the risks. And everyone believed that saving innocent lives was worth the sacrifice. "Does that make it easier?" Garrett asked. "No," Hayes admitted. "It never gets easier. But it makes it meaningful. They did not die for nothing. They died protecting people who could not protect themselves. That means something." Admiral Kate Sullivan was also on Earth, but she was not at the memorial. She was at a naval academy, speaking to new recruits. "The war is over," Sullivan told them. "But our mission is not. The galaxy is a dangerous place. The swarm is gone. But there will be other threats. There will always be people who need protection. That is why we train. That is why we prepare." A young cadet raised her hand. "Admiral, the Union had a much larger military than Earth. Why did they need our help?" Sullivan considered the question carefully. "The Union military is designed for defense. They guard their borders. They protect their worlds. They fight when necessary. But they were not prepared for an enemy like the swarm. An enemy that could not be negotiated with. An enemy that would not stop." 1. "And Earth was prepared?" the cadet asked. "Earth has been fighting for survival since humans first learned to walk," Sullivan replied. "We evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill us. That teaches you things. It teaches you to adapt, to innovate, to never give up. The Union learned those lessons during the war. We already knew them. Thank you for watching. For more Wyke. On the Central Nexus, the council was in session. They were discussing the future. With the swarm gone, what came next? Councillor Thren presented a proposal. A new defensive alliance. A joint military force that combined Union resources with human training and tactics. Ships crewed by mixed species. Troops that trained together. End quote. "We cannot go back to the way things were," Thren argued. "The war proved that. We need to be stronger, more flexible, more willing to act when threats emerge." 1. Not everyone agreed. Some councillors worried that this would make the Union too aggressive, too much like humans. Commander Zalek spoke in favor of the proposal. "I fought alongside humans for months. I watched them face impossible odds and prevail. But I also learned something about them. They do not seek war. They seek peace. But they understand that sometimes, peace must be defended. With strength." The debate lasted hours. In the end, the vote was in favor. A new joint defense force would be created. Human officers would train Union troops. Union engineers would work with human designers. The goal was to combine the best of both sides. But the proposal included one unusual element. Earth would have the final say on when the force was deployed. The Union recognized that humans understood warfare better than they did. They were willing to trust human judgment. President Garrett received the news with mixed feelings. It was an honor. It was also a burden. Earth had become the galaxy's protector. When trouble came, everyone would look to humanity first. "Are we ready for this responsibility?" she asked General Hayes. "We have been preparing for first contact since we saw our first star," Hayes replied. "We always knew there might be others out there. We always wondered if they would be friends or enemies. Now we know they are both, and we know we can handle it." On a distant world at the edge of Union space, a human research station had been established. Scientists from Earth and the Union worked together, studying everything from biology to physics. Dr. Ellen Wright was one of those scientists. She was a biologist studying how different species adapted to their environments. Her current project was analyzing swarm remains to understand how they had evolved such effective regeneration. A Union scientist named Quellen worked with her. He was fascinated by human biology and asked questions constantly. "Dr. Wright, I have been studying Earth's evolutionary history," Quellen said. "Your species faced extinction events multiple times. Ice ages, supervolcano eruptions, asteroid impacts. How did you survive?" "Adaptability," Wright replied. "When the climate changed, we changed with it. When resources became scarce, we learned to find new ones. When predators threatened us, we became better predators." "But you also show remarkable compassion," Quellen noted. "You care for your injured. You share resources with the weak. You form bonds across genetic lines. Most predator species are solitary." Wright smiled. "That is the secret. Humans are pack predators. We survive by working together. One human is dangerous. A group of humans working together is unstoppable." That is what the swarm never understood. They were a hive mind that worked as one. But we are individuals who choose to work together. That makes us stronger. Quellen processed this information. "So humans are dangerous, not despite your compassion, but because of it." "Exactly," Wright said. "We fight hardest when we are protecting something we care about. The swarm threatened innocent people. That made every human soldier personal. We were not just following orders, we were protecting our pack." This information spread through the scientific community. Papers were written. Studies were conducted. The galaxy was beginning to understand what made humans unique. Lieutenant Vess was promoted to commander and given a new assignment. She would lead the cultural exchange program between Earth and the Union. Her job was to help both sides understand each other. She traveled to Earth for the first time. The moment she stepped off the shuttle, she felt the crushing gravity. Even with her support harness, it was difficult to move. And this was normal for humans. They lived in this every day. Captain Morrison showed her around. They visited cities where humans lived and worked. They visited natural areas where Earth's deadly beauty was on full display. Oceans that could swallow entire fleets. Mountains that touched the clouds. Deserts where the temperature could kill in minutes. "This is your home," Vess said in wonder. "This brutal, beautiful world made you what you are." "Yes," Morrison agreed. "Earth is harsh, but it is also amazing. We learned to love it despite its dangers. Or maybe because of them. It taught us that life is precious because it is fragile. That we must fight to protect what we love. That giving up is not an option." As they stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean, Vess finally understood. Humans were not naturally violent. They were naturally protective. Their aggression came from a deep need to defend what they cared about. Their refusal to surrender came from millions of years of refusing to let Earth defeat them. "The galaxy needs to understand something," Vess said. Humans are not dangerous because they want to hurt people. They are dangerous because they will not let others be hurt. That is what makes them terrifying. That is what makes them essential. News networks across the Union broadcast a special program. It was titled The Deathworld Chronicles and told the story of Earth and humanity. It showed how humans had evolved, how they had survived extinction events, how they had unified their planet, how they had answered the call when the galaxy needed help. The program ended with footage from the final battle. Human ships charging into impossible odds. Marines holding the line against overwhelming forces. Soldiers making the ultimate sacrifice to protect others. And it ended with a simple message. When the stars called for help, the Deathworlders answered. They asked for nothing in return. They did not seek glory or reward. They came because it was right. The galaxy will never forget. On Earth, life continued. New ships were being built. New soldiers were being trained. The colonial Marines had become a symbol of human determination. Young people from every nation wanted to join, but Earth had not forgotten what war meant. The memorials remained. The names were remembered. And every soldier who graduated from training visited the wall of names before their first deployment. They stood before those names and made a silent promise to honor the sacrifice, to protect those who could not protect themselves, to never give up, no matter the odds, because that was what humans did. That was what Deathworlders did. They answered the call. Years would pass. The galaxy would face new challenges. New threats would emerge from the darkness of space. But everyone knew that when trouble came, humanity would be there. The stars had learned fear that day. Not fear of destruction or chaos. Fear of what happens when you threaten innocent lives in the presence of a species that evolved by refusing to die. Fear of warriors who fight hardest when protecting others. Fear of humans who had answered the call and changed the galaxy forever. And in the darkness between stars, in the vast, empty spaces where nightmares might lurk, there was now a warning, a message that every species would come to know. Do not threaten the peaceful species of this galaxy, because the Deathworlders are watching, and they will answer the call. She paused and looked at the casualty lists. Nearly 2,000 human soldiers died in this war, Garrett continued. Each one of them volunteered. Each one knew the risks, and each one believed that protecting innocent lives was worth the sacrifice. I hope the galaxy remembers them. I hope you remember what they gave up for you. The Council voted unanimously to lift Earth's quarantine. Humanity was welcomed as a full member of the Galactic Union. But more than that, they were appointed as the Union's primary defense force. The humans had proven they could fight. They had proven they would not give up. And they had proven they would protect others, even at great cost to themselves. The galaxy had learned its lesson. When the next threat emerged, everyone knew exactly who would be on the front lines. The Deathworlders would answer the call. Dozens of battles. Humans charging into overwhelming odds. Humans holding positions that should have fallen. Humans refusing to retreat, even when ordered. We created this situation, Thren said. We quarantined them. We left them alone. We gave them 30 cycles to prepare. And now they are showing us what a death world breeds. Not monsters. Protectors. Warriors who fight for more than just themselves. The council watched in silence as the footage continued. Every counselor was thinking the same thing. The galaxy had changed. There was a new power now. A species that did not care about politics or territory. They cared about protecting those who could not protect themselves. And the swarm was learning what happens when you threaten something a human has decided to protect. Just doing our job, Commander, Sullivan replied. But this is just the beginning. One world saved. Many more still under threat. If you want to really thank us, show us where the swarm is strongest. That is where we are going next. Zalix felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. real hope. The Union had been losing this war since it began. They had been retreating, evacuating, preparing for defeat. Now they had allies who did not retreat, who did not surrender, who charged straight into the enemy and kept fighting until the enemy broke. The galaxy was about to learn what humans were really capable of, and the swarm was about to discover what happens when you threaten a species that evolved by conquering the most dangerous planet in known space. The ships were not elegant like Union vessels. They were blocky and functional. They looked like they were built to take punishment. And as Vess studied their armor plating and weapon systems, she realized that was exactly what they were built for. Captain Morrison's voice came over her communication system one last time. "Tell your Union that Earth is coming," Morrison said. "Tell them the Deathworlders have answered the call. And tell the swarm that they are about to learn what real predators look like." Commander Zalix watched from the command center. He wondered if they had made the right choice. Would the humans help? Would they even care about the Union's problems? And if they did come, would the galaxy survive? What came next? He looked at the star maps, showing the swarm's advance. Then, he looked at the coordinates for Earth. Both were highlighted in red. Both were threats. But right now, he had to hope that one threat would be willing to fight another. He had to hope that Deathworlders could be reasoned with. He had to hope that humans were more than just monsters. The ship carrying Lieutenant Vess vanished into faster-than-light travel, heading for the Forbidden World. The council chamber slowly emptied as counselors returned to their home worlds to prepare their people for what might come next. In the darkness of space, the Vreka swarm continued its advance, unaware that something was about to change. Something that would teach them what true predators looked like.